Okay, well, welcome everybody to another episode of Views from the Field. And I feel very honored to have as our guest Mary Jones today. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you so much for having me, Alan.
Of course. And Mary's been a member of our Mindful Teacher Community Network for several years and has a very strong voice that I'm really looking forward to hearing from, along with exploring some of your path into the field and your work. So very thrilled that you're here, Mary, and look forward to our session. So we've begun, and I want to thank everybody who's joining us on Zoom and everybody who sees this eventually, this particular episode, and especially Mark Foreman, who's with us, who produces these from his studio, Sing to the Mountain Studios. So a lot of appreciation for Mark and grateful for these productions, these acts of love. It's really what they are. So as we take a snapshot of Mary's life and work in the field, feel free to reach out to me and join in some way if you would like to have yourself recorded and be part of this project. So Mary, where shall we begin? How about at the beginning? And I'm going to introduce you a little bit, I think. First of all, I know you as MJ, but in your official introduction, you're Mary Jones and an educator at Mandarin Lakes K-8 Academy in the Miami-Dade County Public School system, which is the fourth largest school district in the nation. So that's quite a distinction. And you've been trained to bring mindfulness into the classroom through Mindful Kids Miami, an organization that is very prominent in teacher training, particularly in the Miami area, but beyond. And now, most excitedly to know and learn about, you're on the road to becoming a qualified and certified mindfulness teacher through the UC San Diego Center for Mindfulness. And that's near and dear to my heart. So I'm looking forward to hearing a little bit about that too. But beginning at the beginning, maybe starting with the fact of being an educator. How did that develop for you in your life? Where did that begin?
Wow. Being an educator, I've been very fortunate. I was born and raised here in the great state of Florida in Miami. And my most influential people in my life were my teachers. And I do believe that's why I'm an educator today, because they were so prominent in my life. And I knew the impact that they had on my life. So therefore, that was the reason that I decided to also be a teacher. And so that is my calling. And the beauty is mindfulness just happened to be a wonderful component of that teaching process. So I'm very grateful of all the wonderful teachers that are not only that help me guide myself, but I know that others that are guiding the rest of students around the world, because they are definitely needed more now than ever. Because in Florida, there is an assault on teaching. And it is going to require all of our voices to be that guiding point for students that are coming along this path.
Do you want to unpack that word assault?
The word assault, for those who have been in the system for quite some time, we know the impact of great teachers. And it is not something that can be done overnight. Right now, we have those who are in the political arena who are allowing people who have not had any type of training in that field to come on board. And it requires a great deal of mindfulness in order to walk this path. And for someone who doesn't even have a degree in teaching, for those in the state of Florida, and for our political leaders to say that it's okay to come aboard and try and learn this field and teach as you go with no degree is a little setback for those who have really poured their heart and their soul into a field that is like no other, because we touch the world. And due to great teachers, you have great leaders. And right now, the pay is not, unfortunately, we just got a 6% raise. And it's over 2% this year we got, and it's supposed to escalate within a couple of years. So the public school system is really taking the brunt. And my concern is the most vulnerable of our students are in the public setting because they don't have the funding to go elsewhere. And parents don't have the funding to take their kids out of that setting and put them into private settings. And today is Mahatma Gandhi's birthday. And it's very fitting because he stated that the true measure of a society, of any society, can be found in how it treats its most vulnerable members. And right now, the most vulnerable population are those students, parents that are just barely making it. And if you're trying to work 2 and 3 jobs to make ends meet, then who's raising the children? And that's the concern for the future. And that's my purpose and reason for doing what I do, because I was one of those students.
Thank you. As one of those students, did you have a favorite teacher that changed your life?
I would have to say my saving grace was my coach, my basketball coach. He saw the value in me when I didn't see it for myself. He took me to a college campus. He took the entire team to a college campus one summer. And that changed the trajectory of my life, just that small token. And taken out of the 4 corners of my walls into another area, I was like, wow, didn't know it existed, because all I could see was what was in front of me. And so I do believe that was the changing of the guard, the changing of who I was. And that's the beauty about teaching, because a teacher holds the vision for children until they can see it for themselves. And then that allows that child to just see that spark and fly on their own. And that's why there's such a passion for not only great teaching, but also mindfulness. And that's been a changing path for me as well.
Yeah. I have a sense you were that favorite teacher for many a student. And I know how you've influenced me in our sessions here on Sundays. So that teaching goes for adults too. So coming back to the mindfulness component, where did that enter the picture? Enter your life?
I've always felt like I was different. Didn't know where I fit in. Had parents who were very religious, and that was just not my forte. It was not a part of who I was. And to speak of storms, so interesting. 30 years ago, Hurricane Andrew blew through South Florida. And that really changed my life, because as he was blowing down my house with me in it, I knew that there had to be a change within me, because for some reason I came out of it unscathed. I lost my house, but I didn't lose my life. And I knew right then and there that had to be an act of something to let me know, hey, it's time to really pay attention to what's going on, because life is a gift. And I do believe laughter is a part of it. And the universe has a way of making you laugh, because as soon as the storm blew through, I walked outside. The first thing I found was $5 on the ground and a shirt. And I picked up the shirt and it said, "I'm having a Malox moment." So I was like, okay, the universe has a sense of humor. And that was the changing of how I saw life. And as life would have it, when I decided to really put my heart and soul into myself and getting out of my own way, and that's the key for me, just doing as much as I possibly could do and staying in my own realm of doing that and being my own mindful teacher and really practicing it, then the universe opens up those doors that are needed. But I noticed that it only opens up when I'm ready for it to be opened. So my job was to get out of the way, allow the universe to do what it did. The universe did blow my house down, which kind of said, hey, okay, wake up. And it's interesting that now, Hurricane Ian has sparked another realm. So out of bad things, great things do occur. And out of that, Hurricane Andrew, it really solidified my path to seeking, who am I? Why am I here? And how can I be of service to not only myself, and then my neighbors and my school, and then eventually, hopefully, others that I come in contact with. So that's how my path really started, with a little blowing of the wind.
Well, may many hear this, be inspired by it wherever this video lands. wherever the wind takes it. So, MJ, that happened. And how then did the mindfulness path proceed for you?
As you know, when the student is ready, the teachers appear. And a teacher on this Zoom call, Valerie Zimmerman York, she started Mindful Kids Miami in South Dade. And it was just a pilot program. So working for free because she was getting into the Dade County system. And I was one of those fortunate people to take one of her courses. And of course, it was the MBSR 8-week course. And at the time, I was dealing with an ailing mom. I had adopted 2 children that happened to be my brother's children because unfortunately he was touched by the system, the penal system, and the children were in foster care. And I, being the only stable person in my family, I took on that responsibility. And as my mother got older, when I did take these classes, at the time, you could not miss any. And when my mom went into the hospital, I had to, being a single mother, I had to take care of her as well as my children. So every time I took one of these courses, I was unable to complete it. I had taken mindfulness 4 times. And Valerie, every single year, she would open it up and it would bring amazing people. I mean, she would have to close out the course because there were too many people. So there was a need for it. So eventually, I've taken the course, had to stop for whatever reason. And then eventually I was able to finish an 8-week MBSR course. And where did it occur? Right before the pandemic. So I'm a great student of life. I love to listen to life because the universe is my greatest teacher. And although it was those 8 weeks, I knew it was preparing me for something because then I sat with John Kabat-Zinn for the mitigation retreat the entire time of him giving himself to so many who needed it at the time. And that was another aha moment for me, another wake-up call. The universe is calling. And it's not only calling me, it's calling all of us to rise to this occasion because the stakes are high. And I was very fortunate to really listen to John Kabat-Zinn during that time. And prior to that, the Katali Foundation, based out of San Francisco, had environmental monies to be distributed, and mindfulness was one of those. And I was fortunate enough to speak with John Kabat-Zinn during one of those mitigation retreats. And I did ask the question of, how are we going to be reaching communities that don't have the resources to sit for 8, to get the license to become a mindfulness teacher? And of course, he said he was speaking with people, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, because I made that pebble, I threw that pebble into the pond, it made rippling effects. And I was fortunate enough to get with the Katali Foundation, who had $500 million, to try and rectify what's going on in our Black and Brown communities. And as you can see, Alyssa, she's one of my Sangha, and we have been sitting together prior to the pandemic. And it has been such a wonderful joy to be with people of color for a cause that others in other communities will never have the opportunity to have or to do. And so I just feel like one of those fortunate soon to be teachers to help those who need it the most.
I didn't realize you were a founding uh, influence in the way that you just described. And was this for the grant that was received through UCSD and the Professional Training Institute, or is this something else that came along?
Actually, the Katali Foundation is, they do have grants for Black and Brown communities. And one portion of that is for mindfulness. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that Larry Yang was really the catalyst for getting this grant into the Black and Brown communities. And he had spoken with Beth Mulligan, and then, of course, the wheels started turning. And I was one of the most fortunate ones because Beth called me to be the last recipient of this portion of the grant that was moving forward for that year. So there are great strides happening. And I'm so fortunate because now not only am I teaching my students, but they're teaching their parents. And the school that I'm in we service students that are migrant labor camp. We service students who are in the homeless shelter, unhoused. And we also service students who are unfortunately been touched by the system, where they may be foster care students or students who are in that system waiting to be adopted. So I'm at ground zero, and I don't think that the universe will put me in a position where I could not be of service. So I am exactly where I should be at this point in time.
You know, I often say that certification, and in terms of programs, the certification of an MBSR teacher is a construct. There was a big debate in the field when it first started back at UMass in the mid 90s or a little later. I don't mind going on record saying this, as to who should be certified and who shouldn't, and what that all means, and who might be left out and who might be included. And it's important. It stands for a certain degree of training. And, you know, it's needed in the system to have teachers of a certain standard. But ultimately, it's a construct. And you are teaching in a way that, and I'll put myself here, someone who's certified will never reach the level of integrity that I feel from you. So I just want to say that because I feel it, and that's here right now, that level of integrity. Coming out of the pandemic, not that we're out of it by any means, but out of that acute phase of it the last 2.5 years. When you talk about these populations that are, you know, challenged to begin with, economically, socially, and now having the effects that we've all been through, that they've been through, what are you seeing?
Right now, I'm seeing a lot of desperation. I see a lot of students that are lost. A lot of students have lost parents due to the pandemic that we're still in. And unfortunately, My own sister's best friend is on a ventilator. My son is in the next room with COVID. So it is not over by any stretch of the imagination. I have a neighbor who has a child with mono now. So, what do I see right now? I see a lot of, in my own community, in the community that I serve, a lot of desperation, a lot of pain, a lot of trauma. And the majority of our students have adverse childhood experiences already. And we know that the higher the adverse childhood experiences you have really speaks to the lack of longevity of your life. It requires us as educators, us that are in leadership positions, it requires a level of not only compassion, but to seek out some answers and some way of reaching those who feel like they're not here or they're not seen, and definitely not heard. And this is really why my mindfulness practice is so of much of importance to me, because to be able to go into and to listen to the stories, I have to have a way of being able to debrief myself, or to be able to stand in the face of how others are hurting without taking that as my own. Because at the end of the day, we are all human and all pain is the same. And so therefore, with my own practice, I try and lead by example to bring my full, authentic self. And sometimes that self hurts. And sometimes I cry. But that's a part of them knowing that I'm no different.
We had talked about a charitable cause, the Mindful Teacher Community Network, and you spoke up. If we had the ability, the resources to follow through, we would. And I came to the conclusion we don't. But the cause that you spoke up about has not left me. And it was around the most vulnerable, the children that don't have the clothes to go to school, the food to give them the strength. You want to speak a little bit about that, the most vulnerable?
Well, considering that all the teachings that we've had, we know that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if those basic needs are not met, then a child cannot sit in front of me and learn whatever I'm trying to disseminate to them. So, with those basic needs not being met, they're not going to be able to thrive as a child. And there's going to be a level of hurt. There's going to be a level of something missing that they're not getting. And to include with the adverse conditions that many of them have, it may also lead to roads that they may not be able to get out of or come back from. So these are questions, are wonderful questions that right now we're all searching for answers. And the one thing that I always say, I might not have the answer. I don't have all the answers. And I say that a lot to my students, and I even say that to their parents. But I know that they heard me. And sometimes the question is not if you have the answer, but did you hear me? Do you see me? Because I feel you. And so right now with the question you pose, yes, students will not have those basic needs. And if those basic needs are not met, then nothing else can be met until we get to that humanistic foundation. And it's not only here, it's across the globe, it's across the world. But as we know, we have to take care of self, and then hopefully it will branch out to the world for our own highest good, because what shows up at my door eventually will show up at your door.
We live the questions because the doors are being smashed down, which is all any of us seem to be able to hold and live into. Are you hopeful?
Teachers are the hope of the future. I am hopeful. I'm very hopeful because I know eventually, if there are enough of us, because we know these bells have been sounding for quite some time, the alarm has been going off since the beginning. And if we don't pay attention to what happened at the beginning, we can't change what's going on right now in the future. So, am I hopeful? Absolutely. Absolutely. Just like it came, as John Kabat-Zinn says, just weathering that tide, that surf. It's going in, eventually it'll come back out. It's just weathering the storm.
Where do you see your teaching moving to? Will you stay where you are in K through 8? Do you have any intentions around that?
For me, my heart is always with the most vulnerable. I see myself in my students. And I know what it's like to be hungry. I know what it's like to have your lights off. I know what it's like to come from a single family home. I know what it's like to have the system be a lifeline for you. And I share that with my students because I want them to know that there is, if I could do it, then they could do it. If I could beat the odds, then they could beat the odds. I worked at a school for 19 years prior to Mandarin Lakes. I worked at Calusa Elementary, a school that lacked for nothing. And I would say to a student, I'm going to call your mom. They say, oh, please don't. Don't call my mom. And they would start to cry. And then my last 14 years have been at another school. And I had an eye-opening moment when I said to a student, I'm going to call your mom. And the little girl said, well, if you find my mom, let me know. And that was like, wow. So that's why I do what I do. That's why I stay where I stay. And until the universe says otherwise, I know I'm exactly where I need to be.
And now you're engaged in mindfulness teaching and teacher training. So, where do you see the BIPOC community within the field?
That is the $1 million question. Actually, that's the $1 billion question. Because we know this is where it's needed the most. This is the lifeline. And the only way that we're really going to reach, because right now, a lot of my BIPOC community is saying, okay, we are the bridge. We are the bridge, but the bridge also needs the help of funding, because this is not something that can be done for free. Sometimes this is the livelihood, but how can we charge someone that doesn't know where the next meal is coming from, let alone trying to pay for mindfulness? So it is a challenge. Are we up to the challenge? Absolutely. We've been up for the challenge since we stepped foot in the door. So we know there are resources. There is no lack anywhere in our world. And as you said, breaking down that door, that's where we are. We are not only breaking doors, breaking barriers, but we are also looking in the face of those who have, to say, let's help those that have not, because this is the only way that we will survive as a species, helping those who are less fortunate. Back to Gandhi. Happy birthday, 153rd birthday today, Mahatma Gandhi. Helping those who are the most vulnerable, the most vulnerable members of our society. And we knew that with the pandemic, who was those that were dying the most. So this is where we are. We're at a crossroad. And we can go right, left, or full steam ahead.
Thank you, MJ. Thank you for being who you are. Thank you for the hope that you've given me, and by virtue of this recording, many. And may we move forward in as much alleviation to the suffering that's caused from the few that aren't helping so many in so many ways through the squandering of resources. So much love for you, MJ.
Back at you, my brother. Back. A little bit for everybody.
But you got it. You got it covered.
Click down below to join our Mindfulness Teacher Community Network on Facebook, where you are invited to post and share. Also, subscribe to Sing to the Mountain Studio. Ring the bell so you don't miss out on future recordings.